everyone in the community of Hilltown adored Veronica James. She was the first to volunteer at the women's shelter, always donated to the church, and visited the sick with baskets of food. People called her Saint Veronica. To outsiders, she was elegance and grace. But at home, the story was different. Her younger sister Maya, her sick mother Grace, and her teenage niece Elsie knew a different version of her, a cold, controlling woman who ruled the house with an iron hand and a sharp tongue. Veronica had taken in her family after their father died, but she reminded them every day that they owed her. While Veronica hugged old ladies in church and smiled at neighbors, she barked at Maya for not cleaning the kitchen her way, and blamed Elsie for anything that went wrong in the house. Grace, now wheelchair-bound, often sat quietly, enduring her daughter's mood swings. "You think being sick gives you a license to be lazy?" Veronica hissed one morning as she shoved a plate onto the table. Maya often cried herself to sleep. She worked 2 jobs but was never good enough in Veronica's eyes. Outside, they looked like a perfect family. Inside, they were broken. One day, Veronica organized a community birthday party for a poor child named Lucy. The crowd praised her generosity, calling her a rare gem. But when Maya asked if they could buy a small cake for their mother's upcoming birthday, Veronica laughed bitterly. "We're not spending a dime on an old woman who just sits around," she snapped. On the day of their mother's birthday, there was no cake, no celebration. Just silence, until Grace quietly whispered to Maya, "I raised a stranger." Things began to change when an old family friend, Mr. Aduin, came into town. He hadn't seen Veronica in over 15 years. "I can't wait to see how well you've raised your family," he told her with a proud smile. Veronica forced a laugh. "Of course, they're doing great." But when Mr. Aduin visited their home, he saw Maya scrubbing the floor on her knees and Grace struggling to reach a water bottle. He asked, "Why is your sister doing house chores in her work uniform? Where's the help?" Veronica's smile faltered. "She insists," she lied. Elsie, the teenager, had watched her mother and grandmother suffer for years. She never spoke out, until now. One Sunday, after service, Veronica stood at the podium thanking everyone for donating to her charity. The congregation clapped. But as she stepped down, Elsie stood up. Her voice was trembling, but her words were clear. "You all see an angel. But at home, she's cruel. She treats my mom and grandma like prisoners. She's kind to everyone but her own blood." A gasp filled the church. Veronica's eyes widened in shock. News spread like wildfire. Some didn't believe Elsie, thinking the teenager was being rebellious. But Mr. Aduin confirmed it. He described what he saw. Soon, neighbors began to remember things. The way Maya's clothes were always worn out, how Grace looked thinner every month, how Elsie never smiled. More and more people began to ask questions. Veronica felt the admiration she once commanded slipping through her fingers. At home that night, Veronica slammed the door shut. "You've embarrassed me, Elsie." "No," Maya cut in. "You embarrassed yourself. You act like a saint, but you treat us like garbage. You're ungrateful." "No," Grace spoke up, her voice weak but firm. "You're unrecognizable." For the first time, Veronica stood in silence as her family confronted her. And for once, no one cowered. Veronica withdrew from the community. She stopped going to church and ignored calls from the shelter. Her reputation had taken a hit. But inside the house, something new was forming. Maya and Elsie began to smile again. They repainted Grace's room and sang old songs in the kitchen. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Veronica watched from the hallway, forgotten in her own home. Weeks passed. Veronica became a ghost in the house. She overheard Grace say one night, "I forgive her, but I don't know if I can trust her." That night, Veronica sat alone and wept, really wept, for the first time in years. The next morning, she made breakfast and served it without a word. It was awkward, but it was a start. Maya said nothing. Elsie looked surprised. Grace nodded slowly. Veronica began attending family therapy with Maya and Grace. It wasn't easy. She slipped up, often. But she was trying. At church, she stopped standing on the podium. She joined the cleaning crew instead, quietly, humbly. Months later, during family prayer night, Grace whispered, "You're changing, Veronica." Veronica took her hand and said, "I just want to become someone you can love again, not someone the world only thinks is good." The real healing had finally begun. Veronica stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Maya gently brush Grace's hair. Her mother's once dark curls were now white and thin, but Maya handled them with such tenderness that guilt gripped Veronica's heart. She had watched her sister do this every evening for years, without complaint, without thanks. "Maya," Veronica said, her voice low. Maya didn't turn around. "Yes, I owe you an apology." Maya's hands paused. She slowly looked over her shoulder. "For what exactly?" "For everything. For treating you like a maid instead of a sister. For blaming you. For not appreciating you." Maya blinked rapidly. "You think sorry fixes 10 years of pain?" "No. But I want to start making it right." Grace looked up. "Then start by listening. Really listening." Later that night, they all sat in the living room. The silence felt heavier than usual. "I think we need rules," Maya said. "Not for control, but for peace." Veronica nodded. "No yelling. No name-calling. If we have something to say, we say it with respect," Maya continued. "And we listen," Grace added. "We don't assume, we ask." Elsie raised her hand. "And we have one meal a week where no one is allowed to talk about chores or problems. Just family." For the first time in a long time, all 4 women agreed on something. Veronica looked around the room. She hadn't earned their trust back. Not yet. But for once, she was willing to follow, not lead. Veronica began journaling, something the therapist suggested. At first, it felt silly. But one entry changed her forever. "I pretend to be kind because it makes me feel powerful. But kindness isn't real if your own family fears you. I wore my goodness like makeup, flawless in public, smeared in private." That night, she looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Not at her hair, not at her clothes, but at her eyes, tired, guarded, sad. "Who have I become?" she whispered. She had spent years feeding the world's love while starving the people at her own table. One evening, Elsie came into Veronica's room holding a sewing kit. "My skirt ripped. Can you help me fix it?" Veronica blinked. "You want me to help? I heard you used to sew. Mom said you made your own prom dress." Veronica smiled for the first time that day. "I did." She sat beside her niece and began stitching. The silence was warm. "You know," Elsie said softly, "I used to think you hated me." Veronica's hands paused. "I didn't hate you. I was just angry at life. And I took it out on you. I think I'm ready to try again. Just don't make me regret it." "I won't." Just when things started to feel better, the doorbell rang one Friday evening. Standing there was Uncle Harris, Veronica's late father's brother. "Well, well," he grinned. "Heard you all needed some help. Figured I'd move in." Veronica was stunned. He hadn't visited in 5 years. Grace frowned. "You're not staying here, Harris. We're finally healing." He laughed. "Come on, Gracie. I'm family." "You're the kind of family that only shows up when there's something to gain," Maya snapped. Veronica stood up. "Uncle Harris, this isn't a hotel. You need to find somewhere else." He looked shocked. "You're kicking me out? I'm protecting my family. Goodbye." Weeks later, Veronica returned to the church, not as a celebrated guest, but as a humble member of the congregation. She stayed in the back pew. No one asked her to speak. That was fine. After the service, a young woman approached her. "You probably don't remember me," she said, "but you gave me groceries 2 years ago when I was homeless. You saved me." Veronica smiled gently. "I remember. I just hope I can now save the people closest to me too." The young woman held her hand. "The world sees you as a hero, but real heroes start at home." Veronica began cooking dinner again, something she hadn't done since their father passed. The first time she made stew, Maya hovered nearby, expecting a snide comment or a complaint about the ingredients. But none came. "I used Mom's old recipe," Veronica said, placing the pot gently on the table. Grace smiled from her seat. Your father would have loved this. They all ate in peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still long silences and old wounds. But for the first time in years, dinner didn't feel like a battlefield. Later that night, Elsie whispered to Maya, "She's really trying." Maya nodded slowly. "Let's see if she keeps going." One afternoon, Maya received an invitation to speak at a women's empowerment event in town. She hesitated. "Veronica always got the spotlight," Maya told the organizer. "I'm just the shadow behind her." But Veronica overheard the call. That evening, she walked into Maya's room and placed a neatly pressed outfit on the bed. "You were never a shadow," Veronica said. "You just stood behind someone who was too proud to let you shine." Maya stared at her. "Go speak. I'll handle the house." And she did. That Saturday, Maya stood before a crowd and told her story, without shame, without fear. And Veronica clapped the loudest. Grace had spent the last few years quiet, often silenced by Veronica's anger. But as the home changed, so did she. She began gardening again, with Veronica helping her water the plants from her wheelchair. "I've missed this," Grace said softly. Veronica knelt beside her. "I've missed you." "You were always strong, Veronica," Grace replied. "But strength without love is a sword with no sheath." Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. "I want to be both now, strong and loving." Grace reached for her hand. "Then you already are." That day, they planted a hibiscus in the yard and named it Hope. 6 months later, their house looked different. The cracks on the wall were patched, not just with cement, but with laughter and forgiveness. Family dinners were filled with stories. Maya had started a small home business. Elsie had joined the school debate team. And Grace, she was the calm heart of the house again. As for Veronica, she still served the community, but now she did it quietly. No more podiums. No more applause. Just small acts of love. One evening, she placed a photo of their family on the mantel. For the first time, no one was forced to smile. They all smiled naturally. Beneath the frame was a handwritten note from Elsie. "The woman I feared is gone. The mother I never had is here." Veronica stood back and whispered to herself, "This is real kindness." The James home had become a peaceful haven until a quiet storm began brewing outside. It started at the grocery store. A neighbor who once greeted Veronica with warm hugs barely nodded. At church, whispers trailed behind her. Some of the women she'd once helped avoided her gaze. "Have I done something wrong?" she asked Maya one evening. Maya looked up from her sewing. "I don't know, but something's off." It didn't take long for the answer to surface. A former volunteer at Veronica's foundation accused her of stealing funds. An anonymous post online read, "Veronica James, saint or swindler?" Even though it wasn't true, it spread like wildfire. Within days, Veronica was removed from the charity board she once chaired. The pastor of her church called for a pause on her public roles. The media took interest. A local blog ran a headline, "Hilltown's Angel Accused of Fraud." Veronica sat at the dining table, stunned. "I didn't take a dime," she whispered. "We believe you," Elsie said, placing a hand on hers. But belief didn't stop damage. Sponsors pulled out. Friends stopped calling. Even Mr. Aduin distanced himself. Grace wheeled herself beside her. "You gave them your hands, but never asked them to see your heart. They're not used to this version of you." Veronica didn't sleep for days. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself again, but this time, not in shame. In fear. "They think I'm still the person I used to be," she told Maya. "That version of me might have deserved suspicion. Maybe I brought this on myself." Maya sat beside her. "You can't fight lies by becoming one again. Just keep doing what's right." Veronica broke down. "I feel helpless." "That's how we felt for years," Maya replied. "You're not being punished, Veronica. You're being shaped." Veronica nodded. "Then I won't quit." Instead of reacting, Veronica began documenting everything. Receipts, email trails, bank statements. She contacted a lawyer, quietly. She also kept showing up at the shelter, even though no one greeted her. She mopped floors, cleaned toilets, served meals. One afternoon, a young mother whispered, "They said you were fake. But I see you. And I'm staying because of you." It was the first light in her storm. Meanwhile, the truth slowly unraveled. The volunteer who accused her was caught withdrawing cash using a stolen signature. It wasn't Veronica. It had never been. But the damage had already taught her a new kind of humility. A town hall was held to address the controversy. Veronica was invited, but this time, not to defend herself. The charity board publicly apologized. "We allowed suspicion to guide us. Ms. James has been cleared of all wrongdoing." There was polite applause. But the warmth was gone. Veronica stepped forward. "I don't want your claps," she said gently. "I want my name to mean something in my home, not just out here." She turned to leave, but paused. "I spent years hiding cruelty behind charity. Now I choose quiet goodness, even when the crowd walks away." And with that, she walked out. Weeks after the town hall, Veronica no longer received invitations or recognition. But oddly, she felt freer. "I used to crave praise," she told Grace one evening. "Now I just want peace." Grace smiled. "Then you're finally free." One afternoon, Elsie sat beside her, holding a college brochure. "I got in," she said quietly. "Full scholarship." Veronica beamed. "You're amazing." "There's one problem," Elsie added. "It's out of state." Veronica's smile faltered for a moment. "Then we'll help you pack." "You're not mad." "No, sweetheart. You're not my prisoner. You're my pride." Elsie leaned her head on Veronica's shoulder. "You've changed everything for me." When Elsie left for college, the house felt hollow. Maya busied herself with her new tailoring business. Grace spent time in the garden. But Veronica, she stood in Elsie's room every morning, missing the laughter, the rolled eyes, the long talks. She began writing letters to Elsie, not for mailing, but for healing. "You were the mirror I didn't want to look into. You saw me at my worst, and still chose to love me. That's not teenage rebellion. That's grace." These letters became her journal, and later something more. One day, Maya stumbled upon Veronica's journal. "These are beautiful," she said. "You should share them." Veronica shook her head. "They're just letters." "Then let someone read them. Someone who needs hope." With Maya's help, Veronica submitted a few entries to a local women's magazine. To her surprise, they published them under the title, "Letters to the Girl I Once Hurt." Soon, she received responses from mothers, sisters, daughters, all relating to her story. She realized something powerful. The world didn't need a perfect image. It needed truth. As word spread, Veronica was invited to speak, not as a saint, but as a survivor. This time, she stood before crowds not with polished speeches, but raw honesty. "I used to be cruel to my family while the world praised me. I thought kindness was performance. But real kindness begins at home." People cried. Some hugged her. Others confessed they had once judged her without knowing the full story. Veronica no longer wore masks. And strangely, now that she had nothing to hide, people truly saw her. One bright morning, a letter arrived from Elsie. "I read your article, Aunt V. You're changing lives, just like you changed ours. I told my class about you. You're not just my family. You're my hero." Veronica wept as she read the words. That night, she gathered Maya and Grace. They sat by the fireplace, sipping tea. "We've come a long way," she whispered. Maya smiled. "And we're still going." Grace held their hands. From broken pieces to beauty. And in that quiet room, the woman once called wicked by her own family finally found what years of praise and applause had never given her. Home. And true, lasting love. Please, subscribe to African Tales by Hellengold for more African stories. Comment, like, share, and turn on your notification bell.